In Singapore, we eat what we want, when we want, and we want it now. But as the world stands at the brink of a possible food crisis, this culinary paradise must take greater measures to fortify its food supply. What does it take to keep a city of 5.6 million fed?
We cannot take food for granted in Singapore. We're so dependent on other people. The more we understand how food is produced, the more we appreciate food.
Singaporeans should go local because they will know where the food comes from, and supporting a local producer also means that you're supporting sustainably.
The world is increasingly more resource constrained. We need to produce more with less. And I think technology will be an enabler in this process.
When we talk about food security, we're talking about a situation where all people at all times can have access, physical access, economic access, to food that is safe and nutritious. It's no longer calories, and that's where vegetables become so important. Hence also the focus on vegetables in Singapore. Vegetables really supply you the minerals and vitamins. That's what food security is.
If we do it in a very conventional way, the traditional farming, it actually means that we have to devote a huge multiple of land, many times of land in Singapore for farming, which we cannot afford. We have to look at competing needs for our lands, and therefore, we have to make some serious choices between development, between our schools, between factories, and HDB flats and farms.
When we started out, we wanted to look at rooftops because currently only 1% of the area, the land here, is actually segmented for traditional farming. So if we really wanted to contribute to, I would say, food production in a very meaningful way, we need to look at alternative areas for farming. Car park rooftops, they are usually underutilized as the sun is very hot. So rarely would people want to actually park on a rooftop. My parents, they opened up a farm in Batu Pahat area. And I grew up actually going to the farm over there and then also doing like door-to-door deliveries, hosting farm tours at a traditional farm. So that kind of exposure to, I would say, farming in general actually created a level of interest for me. And I knew that all along I always wanted to go back to, I would say, urban farming. Aqua organic system growing technology was actually invented by my colleagues in-house, Mr. Teo. So he's someone who has very rich agriculture experience. We really tested out with a lot of different growing mediums, different growing methodology to create this aqua organic system that's unique to our company, unique to, I would say, Singapore. We can even call it like an Singapore innovation. The aqua organic system here is actually a zero-waste farming system. So what do I mean by that is that Every component in our farming system is actually reusable and recyclable. So even for our growing medium here, we are actually using fired clay pebble. And this fired clay pebbles here is actually every time we harvest it, we actually reuse it, we wash it, and then we put it back in the system. So with this fired clay pebble, we also have thin film of water that flows below this layer of pebbles, and every drop of water is actually in constant motion. So you can imagine every molecule of water actually travels through about 5 kilometers of distance, and then they are in constant motion. So that actually helps to prevent like mosquito from breeding. At the same time, the angle of the farming system also helps to actually allow a more efficient flow of the water. So this reuses overall like the electricity consumption we have when we're trying to drive that water flow.
We're letting the players decide, and we're funding them quite broadly based on some broad indicators like yield on the land and so on. And it's really for us and the industry to prove that certain technologies will work or will not work.
When we were starting out to grow our produce, we did experience a lot of challenges from such like climatic conditions because they were irregular. And as such, our produce, they weren't growing in a way that we expected them to grow. So over time, we actually did a lot of research in terms of like plant science, plant health, the growing medium that we use, even the solution that we are using right now to really refine our growing technology. Okay, so now I'm harvesting the nai pai. And for us, actually, what we are trying to do here is that we're also hoping to share with consumers that actually plants, vegetables, some of them, they actually come in varying shades of colors, of greens and yellows, and they are all still safe for consumption. When you look at the local produce that's available, in general, we might cost slightly higher compared to produce that are imported from overseas, for instance, due to the fact that we don't really have as much economies of scale that we can tap on. So the interesting thing about how we go about our harvesting is that for our sweet nai pai order, we actually harvest them and deliver them with the roots. And then we do a quick dip. And then we'll pack them like that as well. So don't you think it looks like a bouquet of vegetables? Yeah. We do hope that more and more locals can actually start to, I would say, focus to find out a bit more about the kind of variety of local produce that's available in Singapore. As actually, I would dare to say that our local produce is actually of comparable quality, or even better quality compared to like imports coming into Singapore.
If we are able to control the quantity of cheaply imported vegetables, maybe the local farms here will have an opportunity to thrive as well. So my question really is, if locally grown greens are actually more expensive, why don't we actually help our local farms to bring down their costs by increasing the demand for locally produced products?
Farming and being a farmer is one of my identities. I don't see it as a label that completely describes me. I'm also raising awareness about food production, conducting workshops. I'm also doing like the business development aspect.
We know that some of these farms, depending on what technology you use, can be very energy intensive, right? But we also know there's a lot of research going on right now to tap solar energy for rooftop farms. Okay? So to me, it's still a question mark. But technically, technologically, can you grow vegetables on rooftops? Yes, definitely.
We often get asked why kale. We didn't want to focus on growing products that can grow locally. We don't believe that that is what indoor farms should be about. It's really about disrupting the food value system. We want to focus on the products that are imported. The reason for that is that today 70% of produce is actually wasted getting it to the end consumer. We grow impossible products in impossible places that are not only 100% clean, they are completely free of pesticides, they're traceable, and they're very sustainable as well. So the typical life cycle of a plant in traditional farming is they put the seed in soil, it grows up, and then it gets harvested. For us, we need to be super efficient with all of our resources, everything from the rent, the space that we have, all the way through to electricity. So we break the life cycle up into many, many phases so we can be as optimum as we can with the inputs at different parts of growth. Jaslyn works very closely with the R&D team. In fact, Jaslyn was one of our first employees and now runs up the whole nursery section. Half the products we're growing today is because of Jaslyn.
All these root is they push up. That's
They
why
push
I
it up.
I need to push down again.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because once they push up all these, the plant, the moisture, they won't get so much because the root is already outside here.
Yep.
So I pushing in then to get the moisture inside the farm cube.
That's right.
So it can grow faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we have the 100% germination
Yes,
success.
yes. Yeah.
And then we set the plant up for good growth in the main grow area.
Yes.
What is required is the ability to grow more with less. As countries navigate a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment, I believe the most important word to them now is consistency. And with our sort of program where we are able to consistently control our output, our production has no surprises.
This is our sustainer seeding machine. What it does is actually auto seeding. So comparing a manual seeding that's being done by an operator, they would do it in 1 hour. But for this machine, it would actually do it in 20 minutes or less. Right? So it helps on our yield and productivity. And at the same time, it helps on getting our germination and seed placement in a better position. So it actually improves our process.
In August 2012, when I was traveling home from work, and the illustrations that I was looking at on vertical farming gave me this idea about how this could actually be done in Asia. I didn't just jump into vertical farming. I took it for a very, very long test drive, as much as 18 months, trying to figure out, can this actually work? What do I need to create to make it happen? I don't feel like I pursued this. I feel like it kind of chose me in a way, but it kept me getting up every day, trying to figure a way that we can do this. The perception of farming in Singapore is completely changing. I mean, we're wearing clean suits and there's zero soil. In fact, we're farming in 22 degrees. I think we're completely changing the landscape of farming, which is necessary.
Vegetables like kale and lettuce, the people who buy them are willing to pay a premium. Okay? But even kale itself, it's difficult to compete with kale imported from elsewhere.
We wanted to educate our community on the importance of high nutrition, quality over quantity. Now, when I first started serving kale to Singaporeans, a lot of them didn't actually enjoy the flavor whatsoever. We took the feedback from the customers and we found a way to actually adapt the taste, the characteristics of the product by controlling the environment. So today, our kale is crispy. It's actually sweet almost.
The most intriguing question is, under non-normal circumstances, what kind of foodstuffs will people be willing to buy? And at what price? And ask yourself the same question. If there's a crisis, no fresh vegetables from Malaysia, will you be willing to buy hydroponics, even at a higher price? I think to me the answer is most likely a yes.
Fish is important to grow in Singapore because we have sea spaces, which tend to have fewer competing needs compared to land. There's also the problem of declining wild catch globally, and that's why we think it's important to produce fish in Singapore.
Barramundi is the only ocean-based farm in Singapore. Behind ocean-based farming, there are a lot of sophisticated technology and investments involved. I think most critically is the know-how. Barramundi Asia is founded in 2007 by two Dutchmen. They brought with them the experience of how to farm salmon in that deep sea environment. They came down to Asia and Singapore specifically to look for the next white salmon. And they landed on Barramundi and landed in Singapore. Barramundi has a unique taste and flavor. It is an oilier, fattier fish. It has a very good texture to pan fry and grill. So this is where we grow our fingerlings. They are in very big circular tanks. So this is also designed specifically so that the water flow rate would be good for the fish to stay active. Our barramundi takes 2 years to grow. And we grow the baby fish all the way from what we call fry, all the way to adult size of 4 kg. And we control and monitor the entire supply chain with great care. They are sort of all looking at me right now. That actually shows that they are hungry. And we actually, in a way, train them to eat at certain timings. We will try to scatter the feed across the tank so that they don't cluster. They will spread out a little bit. And actually, it's through these methods of feeding and observing the fish that we can tell whether the fish they're healthy or not. A lot of planning goes into making sure that we have a constant supply for our customers. I think the worst thing to happen is to have a disrupted supply. Ocean-based farming requires a lot of expertise for veterinarians, marine biologists. We have engineers as well to make sure that we can set up all the systems. The lack of talent and expertise is challenging for a farm like us, especially when we're doing ocean-based systems.
A large part of the agricultural workforce is older and declining, and it has been a challenge to try to attract a new generation of young people who want to join the agriculture sector because of its traditionally tough image.
The guys now are actually trying to join the nets so that the fish are then gathered to the point at the corner of the cage so that the crane can just then drop in a bucket to lift the fish out of the water and then immediately load them into an ice bucket. The harvesting process actually requires a lot of logistics. So as the nets are being seine, what will happen is that the fish, they were constantly fighting against the nets being drawn in. They're getting a little bit tired. And once they sort of settle down and we don't see much movement, that's where we drop our harvest bucket in and then we start to scoop them out. And each time when we do that, actually, the weight is being measured. So we know exactly how much comes out. And on average, we harvest about 5 to 7 tons each time. When you look at the fish, if you look at the color of the gills, the eyes, and also the kind of natural shine and slime that it has on its body, this tells you that it's a healthy fish. It is almost an arm's length. They are very active fish. They swim very fast and there's a lot of activity. Our guys do dive inside to get to experience them very close up. And they are not shy. They'll come out close to you, they'll brush past you. They don't mind that kind of interaction.
That's right.
Not all fish are farmed equally. So when you see a fish in a small market, it could be caught unsustainably in the wild. When it comes to farming, there are many ways you can farm a fish.
Aquaculture and agricultural sectors represents one of the last frontiers, which many people have talked about. And we think that this will be the right time to look at using the positive forces of technology appropriately to basically reap the benefits. Additionally, I think when people think about agriculture and aquaculture sectors, people think of traditional farmers, very low-paying jobs, toiling in open field farms and so on. But today, I think we are seeing very different formats out there.
Farming ornamental fish is actually not so far from farming marine fish. In the way that they build the tanks in ornamental fish, right, it also is stacked process. If we are able to develop a single level tier, or what's stopping us from trying to stack them in verticals upwards. We're a land-based aquaculture facility, and it's an enclosed environment. One of the key points of a land-based vertical farming like what we have here is actually we are very kept in a clean environment, not exposed to any form of contamination. The labor footprint is actually very low. What you're looking at here is 2 great big tanks of coral trout. In total, around here, I think we're looking at more than 5 tons of coral trout that we have here. And over at level 2, you'll be seeing some of our hybrid grouper, longhu. I want you all to have a look at this place where we actually are housing some of the fries of the longhu. There are small tanks that's housing all these different hybrid grouper. We have 4 main species right now that we're farming. We have the hybrid grouper, the coral trout, the white shrimps, and the blue shrimps. Our current production numbers are actually at about 200 tons to about 220 tons per year. Money is a problem lah. I think the biggest challenge, of course, is funds is one challenge. I think the other challenge is also the knowledge. Seafood or fish aquaculture farming is actually a very challenging business to understand and to grow it in that kind of scale in terms of understanding first the technology, the breeding, the condition, the environment, and how to make sure that this fish grows in good, consistent condition. Welcome to the Apollo Command Center. This is where we consolidate most of our farming data and remotely assessing all the different settings of the farm. From whether it is the temperature, the salinity, the oxygen, the pH, they all can be monitored from this remote station. Whenever there is something like an alert that appears, right, we will be able to trigger a manpower on site. Yeah.
The high-tech farming sector is actually a really nascent sector, and it resulted from the confluence of a few fields: traditional agriculture, as well as engineering, biotechnology, robotics, artificial intelligence. Farming today has much more possibilities than people have imagined in the past.
I think the golden question is always, if Apollo is using technology, wouldn't your production be more expensive and not competitive than the other kind of traditional farming? So the answer actually is because that we are now producing 6 times more, right, in terms of absolute production versus that cost, right, based on proportion, we are actually more competitive. To whether or not Singaporeans support local produce, I think a lot of it comes down to price. Price is always still the concern that Singaporeans are looking at. I mean, to them, they actually not so worried about produced where or imported because it hasn't really hit that point yet. But COVID does bring up that awareness. But at the end of the day, Singaporeans, they still look at price.
The industry players themselves are fully aware they cannot be producing all premium products because that will subject themselves to a risk. So they're doing a portfolio approach, producing some for the mass market and producing some for the premium market so that they can come up with a profitable formula.
Eggs has been always part of us, like as in Asian cuisine. We use it as a complement to our noodles.
We put eggs in everything, like mee goreng, prata, rojak. So in our food, there's eggs.
We use eggs on all our set menu. As you know, nasi lemak, one of the basic ingredients is fried eggs.
我的食物是要用到鸡蛋。第一点，我觉得鸡蛋是有营养。第二点呢，就是我的炸粿条 and Hokkien mee and carrot cake 也是要用到那个鸡蛋。我1个月的里面，我是要用到的18,000粒鸡蛋。
Per month will be 9,000 eggs.
200 to 300 eggs a day.
4,005 eggs in total per month. I'm pretty shocked, but yeah, here we are.
Today, we just welcome another batch of 23,000 day-old chicks from SFA-accredited breeder farms. So every month, we'll welcome one batch of chickens into our farm.
I'm checking the chicks' condition, the feathers, the legs, and their reaction. It's quite smooth then, considered good. But because we do the vaccine for these chicks, so it's green color. After I check the chicks, I'll put the chicks into the cage.
Our government set a big goal to produce 30% of our nutritional needs by 2030. is challenging, but we must act now and not later on when we need more food. Eggs are one of the most nutritious food on earth and definitely one of the most affordable form of protein available. Eggs are also very versatile and it can be used widely in many cuisines. So it makes sense for us to include eggs in part of our 30 by 30 vision.
Eggs are the few main food types, staples to Singaporeans, where most of us consume. It's also about strategically targeting at food types where we think in Singapore we have a good chance of producing it in scale.
In the new farm, we are hiring more high technology. For example, in our old farm, we have about 52 houses. And moving into our new farm, we only have about 26 houses. Okay, so this is our cage-free layer system. There are about 25,000 birds inside this house. Let me show you how they live. Please watch your way when you are going. So as you can see, the birds have the room to move around vertically and horizontally. So over here, we have automated feeding system and also drinking system. The egg collections and also the manual belt system is automated as well. So we do not need a lot of manpower inside this house to manage it. You may be wondering what's behind the orange curtain. That's actually where the chicken lay the eggs. Let me show you. Birds like very dark environment where they feel very secure so that they can lay their eggs in a very peace of mind. So after they lay the eggs, then they will come out, then the next birds will go in. We are expecting about 22,000 eggs to be laid every day. Normally, the hens will start laying between like 8 a.m. up to like about 2 p.m. So this is the period where they lay. So we have to arrange our workers to be ready to pick the eggs once the eggs are laid. Okay, as you may realize, why are the hens I keep on packing on my yellow color boots? It's because the color of my boots look the same as the color of the feet. So they keep on packing on it, they thought it's the food. It's fully automated. In this control panel, we are able to see the temperature, the humidity, the air ventilations of the house. Other than that, we are also able to see the feed consumption on that day and also the water consumption at that day. Our workers just need to go to the control panel to do some adjustment and we are able to manipulate the environment of the house.
Automation is important. Our egg farms are probably the most technologically advanced. Most people don't realize this, but in the 70s, Singapore's poultry farming was considered amongst the most advanced in the world.
With the support from Agriculture Productivity Fund, we invested in this state-of-the-art egg grading, sorting, and packaging machines. These machines have the capacity to grade up to 190,000 eggs per hour. This is more than double of our old farm's capacity. We have this egg inspection. Over this egg inspection, any dirty eggs and leaking eggs will be detected over here. Then it will go through the orientator. What this orientator will do is, it will orientate all the eggs so that all the air cells will be facing in one direction to maximize the freshness. Then we have this crack detector, where as small as a hairline crack will be detected over here before it moves to the next QC check. Over here, we will have the UV disinfection, so all the UV ray will kill all the microorganisms on the surface of the shell. Then it will be weighted and graded according to their size and sent to the respective lanes. Normally for the supermarket's item, right, we will pack it in a pack of 10. So for those, we use the plastic trays. And for the one in the 30S, which we sell it to the F&B market, we sell it to the wholesaler, we will normally use the egg trays in the paper form. Land constraint and manpower shortage are definitely two of the most common challenges that every farmer faces in Singapore. But other than that, we also face the challenges of higher production costs as compared to the imported eggs. Higher production costs also means that we have to sell our eggs at a higher price as compared to some of the imported eggs. This is something that not all the consumers understand and able to accept.
Eggs is a simple commodity that all of us can recognize. In Singapore, we've got 3 local farms, but do you know that we do not control the eggs that are imported as well? Because SFA wanted to ensure that we have got the luxury of choice, different countries and all that. But recently, because there's so much of imported eggs, right, there's been the stories in the press that you are throwing away eggs because eggs has short shelf life. So we have asked some of the local farms before, hey, if we do not import eggs, do we have enough eggs? You know, are we able to give you enough mileage and say, can our chickens actually produce enough eggs? And the answer is yes.
Our new farm has the capacity to produce up to 1 million eggs per day. During the pandemic, it's like a wake-up call for all Singaporeans to realize the importance of our national food security. Because we can't just increase our production within a day or years. It's a very long-term goal for Singapore.
It is not impossible at all to grow fruits commercially in Singapore. Technically speaking, we have the right climate, we've got the right even soil quality for it, and space. We do have a lot of space despite what other people may say. But whether it is economically desirable, that's of course another question. So why aren't we growing more fruit trees? Short answer, planning priorities. When there are more fruit trees, you need people to harvest them, you need people to take care of them, you need people to maybe maintain them more than ornamental trees, and we don't want to do that. Singapore would always want to eat the temperate fruits just because we are a very cosmopolitan city. We will see these foods on television, we will read about them, we will travel, we will like them, and therefore we would crave for them all times of the year. Nothing wrong with that, but we should then also put some effort and emphasis on learning about indigenous fruits and vegetables. The ones here are much younger because we planted them when we came to the land just 20 years ago.
Okay.
So they're quite good though, because jackfruit, they get productive pretty quickly.
Yeah.
They start to fruit, you know, as young as 3 years.
We would love to be able to source some jackfruit here in Singapore. So do you have plans to grow more?
I think if our lease is renewed, we would grow a lot more of everything, jackfruit included. You know, now you start to see a lot of more mainstream restaurants using it as a meat substitute.
So Corona is a whole plant-based meat brand. Dan, my co-founder, was the first to really kind of latch onto jackfruit. He actually had a dish and he thought he was eating pork, and it turned out it was jackfruit. And that's where we really realized that it had this amazing potential. We're trying to show the versatility of the fruit and how it can be used as an amazing meat substitute.
Yeah.
But I think the one difficulty is that it's really hard to use from a chef's perspective because it's pretty laborious. But the great thing about it is a sustainable crop and it's easy to grow. I mean, how do you guys find it growing?
We have dozens of jackfruit trees here.
Yeah.
You know, they fruit year-round. They give us a lot of fruit. The volume is great. The yield is great because they're very heavy. Each fruit gives us a lot of meat.
Yeah.
So to speak.
It's actually the highest yielding tree fruit in the world.
We're taking alternative proteins very seriously because it is possible to produce them using less land compared to traditional forms of cattle farming, and it's also more resource efficient and environmentally sustainable.
Okay, so once our knives and our hands are oiled, we're just going to go right into it and we're going to remove the skin of the jackfruit. This is the part that needs a lot of strength.
Ugh. This is why I don't do it too much, because I know how difficult it is.
Yeah.
getting a lot of resistance and the knife's kind of stuck, so probably have to actually work it a little bit. It's not the easiest, and I think that's why a lot of chefs shy away from using it, even though it's an amazing and versatile ingredient. And what makes it really interesting for us is these fibers, because when we're using it as a meat replacement, these fibers are very naturally meaty. We see the population in Asia is growing and the population worldwide is growing, and with that comes a huge insatiable demand for meat. In fact, it's projected to grow by 78% to 2050. There are a number of reasons to eat less meat, but I think the primary reason is because of climate change. We are putting an enormous stress and pressure on our planet through our animal agriculture system. And if you layer on top of that things like swine flu and coronavirus that are putting increasing pressure on food supply chains, it's clear that we need to do something a little bit different.
Worldwide, we know that there's about at least 30,000 different species of edible plants, out of which, though, we're merely consuming 150 different ones on a regular basis. We've worked very, very intensely on finding the best way to actually translating the raw jackfruit into this meat-like product. Here we are actually using traditional cooking techniques, but of course at a slightly different scale. And through this process, we are managing to bring out this meat-like fibrousness texture in the best way. In terms of texture, what we're really seeing is that jackfruit lends itself to that perfectly because of just the internal structure of jackfruit itself, where the fibers are packed in a very dense way that resembles muscle fiber from an optical point of view. It's more like a cooked meat where the proteins are already denatured, so it does not provide the binding, but of the individual pieces, it really gives you that meat-like experience.
Some of the challenges of introducing meat substitutes into Asia is, firstly, there's consumer acceptance. And a lot of consumers here, they have a misconception about the nutritional values of the products.
So now that the product is available for chefs like me, what I do is then I further get into different avatars or different dishes so that it becomes like a really, really tasty treat to eat as well. Case in example is a bulgogi that I've done here. So we need to strike a middle ground, see as to which flavor profile will suit like the 80 percentile. When you're doing something which is very meat-like, you're also thinking of like animal fat, mouthfeel, apart from like just the flavor and the perspective.
But yeah, like the latest tweaks that we did on the process for the color of the product, that was of course with the benchmark to have it look as much like pork as possible.
Yeah.
Agri-food tech startups are a natural agent and also a natural disruptor in the whole process because they are able to take on more risks and experiment in technologies in ways which traditional food companies are less able to. They are therefore better placed to commercialize new food products and therefore bring new options.
I think the market for meat substitutes is definitely emerging here in Asia. It is definitely still nascent, but you're seeing a lot more innovations and brands coming to market and a lot more interest.
As our production capacity ramps up, over time, Singaporeans will have to adjust to a more sustainable way of producing things, which may be at a slightly higher cost, but it actually forms a certain security blanket as we insure ourselves against future pandemics and also supply chain disruptions.